Hello, everyone. We're just going to give people a second to come in, and then we'll get started. We'll wait about 1 more minute and then we'll start. Thanks for coming tonight and making time for our pre-med Q&A. Just a few more seconds and we'll get started. Okay, let's get started. So I can introduce myself and then we'll have Robert introduce himself and then we'll start with the questions. So I'm Sagrika, I use she, they pronouns. I've been working for Illumin for about a year now. I work as an essay specialist, so I help students with editing their college application essays. And I also was a neuroscience major in college and was pre-med. So I'm excited to share with you all a little bit of insight into that experience.
Hi, everyone. I am Rob Brown. I am a consultant here with Illumin. I've been with the group for over a year now. Also, previously was an interview trainer and an essay specialist. I actually started my career in dentistry. Did that for about 30 years. Technically still have my license, but haven't done it for the last couple. I live out in the New York metropolitan area, so it's a little bit cooler than for those of you out west. I apologize. I grew up in northern New Jersey, went to the University of Pennsylvania, did a combined dental undergraduate program, which is called their biodental program. Back then it was 6 years, now it's 7 years. Most of my dental career in public health, hospitals, dental schools, nursing homes, did some private practice. From the consultant standpoint, I'm a graduate of the University of California, Riverside College Admissions Counseling Program. I've been an alumni interviewer for Penn. Also did admissions work for the Northwell Health General Practice Dental Residency for a number of years. So I've been working with students from high school, college, dental school, and residency. So happy to be here and share whatever knowledge I can with all of you.
Great. Okay, so we have some questions to start out with, and then we'll transition later into all of your questions. So feel free to put them in the chat or in Q&A. Yeah, we're just gonna warm up with a few of our own questions. So one of the first questions we have is, what do application readers look for in a pre-med applicant?
Well, at the undergrad level, meaning, high school students applying to colleges or university, they want to see obviously strong grades overall, but really looking for strong coursework in the sciences and math. So we're really looking at, want to make sure you've got everything covered: biology, chemistry, physics, calculus. If you could take statistics, that'd be great. Also, the more selective schools are going to be looking at the higher level versions, the AP levels. If the less selective schools certainly would appreciate the APs, but you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of taking regular level or honors level, but you do want to make sure that you have all of your science, your basic sciences covered. You know, if you do something like an elective anatomy and physiology, that's certainly great. Also, if you have the opportunity to take any kind of biochemistry course, whether that's through a summer program or an online course through, you know, something like EDX or Coursera, also a benefit as well. But the bare minimum, you want to make sure you have those foundational courses in bio, chem, physics, calculus.
Definitely. And to add on to that, I think it's important also in your essays and activities to be demonstrating some kind of interest in the medical field. Obviously, colleges are aware that as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, you don't have access to like very many experiences, but showing that the things that you've been spending your time on and the way that you write an essay about your academic interest is really portraying that you have done something to create this interest, right? This interest is coming from somewhere. And I also want to note that I think a common misconception for folks is that pre-med is a major. It is not a major. It is you wanting to go to med school and you have your own major. So that major can be biology, something very sciencey. It doesn't have to be something very sciencey. I think it's important to know that pre-med is not an actual major. So when you're filling out your college applications, don't put pre-med as your major on the application.
And I'm just going to piggyback on yours for a moment. Is in addition to the coursework and writing those kind of intentional essays, you do want to make sure that you also really dig deep and figure out, do you really want to do this as a career? Best ways of doing that: shadowing a physician or a dentist or anybody else in the health professional field. If you're thinking about doing physical therapy or occupational therapy, nursing, shadowing is a really great opportunity. It was tough for the last few years with COVID. Obviously, a lot of offices were limiting having additional people in the offices, but with the numbers going down, thankfully, a lot of offices are opening back up, allowing high school students to shadow. I would say for students, really great thing you could do: reach out to the connections in your community. Start there. If you have a pediatrician or a general practice, an internist, a general dentist, ask them, can you come in? Can you do it regularly? Can you only do it once? Some people will let you come in once, some will let you say, hey, you know what, come in weekly, that would be great. You could also maybe do a variety of offices: a general practitioner, a specialist. You could also reach out to hospitals and nursing homes in your areas to volunteer. Again, these places are happy to have extra hands. You can kind of help patients, which is a great thing to learn. You can also, develop a relationship with these patients, learn about them, and also, really pick the brains of the specialists and the staff. So that's a great possibility. Also, if you could get a job at these offices, some places are hiring for front desk positions. Part-time is fine. Sometimes it might be on a weekend, but once you get into the office, more places than not are willing to have you, hang out, ask questions, and most professionals are really happy to share their experiences with students.
Definitely. Okay, and then kind of going off of what I had just said, what majors are best for pre-med, and are there any majors that don't fit well with pre-med?
Yeah, it was a great comment you brought up there, because so many people do think there's a pre-med major. No, the thing that you have, once you are in a college or university and you have this goal of going to medical school, dental school, you have to take certain required courses. Generally, those are intro-level calculus, intro-level general chemistry, two courses in organic chemistry, intro-level physics, calculus. Some schools will also ask you to do a couple writing courses. Some will ask for biochemistry. Some are also asking for some intro-level psychology courses. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what major you have. you could do, as long as you take those courses, you can be any major. Now, with that said, some majors are easier than others to kind of fit those requirements. So I was a psychology major, it was easy to, some of those courses counted towards my major. So that was really helpful. But you could be an English major, a history major, business major. Probably the hardest thing is being an engineering major because that is such a regimented curriculum that it may be difficult to find extra electives to be able to do that. But it's not out of the question if you did something like biomedical engineering. Certainly it's possible, but if you are going that route, you do want to check with each individual college or university and say, is there a possibility for me to be, a pre-med student while doing this major? But I would say that honestly, when you talk to admission staffs at medical schools, at dental schools, they really value the people that are taking majors outside of the traditional natural sciences. They bring a lot of perspective and skills that aren't found through the natural sciences. Most people who again, like if you let's say you were a business major, that's one of the things that's not covered very well in medical school or dental school, the business side of practicing medicine, opening up a business, really helpful. If you have a liberal arts oriented major, you will develop creative thinking, analytical reasoning, better writing skills, will really stand out, not only while you're in school, but also beyond there. If you're looking to be a department head, lead a medical organization at the local or national level. So really, you should not narrow your choices because of pre-med. As long as you take those, you can fit those requirements in, anything is fair game.
Yeah, there are actually many medical schools that value students who are humanities majors, which is English, history, that kind of stuff. They like that, the fact that you would have a very broad range of experience. I think one of those schools is George Washington University in DC. The medical school really values that. And also I want to add that it will depend on the institution you're going to. For example, if you're going to a big UC, it's going to be hard to get into classes. And if you're majoring in something completely unrelated to science, they might not prioritize you for those classes. And then you might end up, getting delayed. Because also a big thing about pre-med is everything builds on each other. You can't take organic chemistry until you take general chemistry. And then you can't take biochemistry until you've taken general and organic. And you can't take an upper division biology class until you've taken Bio 101. So it all builds on each other, which means if you get behind even a semester, that can mean that you have to graduate later to finish those courses. And it's really unfortunate because it doesn't provide a lot of flexibility. But I think it's just something to be aware of, is those bigger institutions that might be more difficult. I see that as a good reason to look into smaller schools and liberal arts colleges where you get a lot more flexibility and a lot more one-on-one attention and mentorship with being a pre-med student. And yeah, I think Rob basically covered all of them. Physics is also a big one. And those courses are not only requirements to apply to the med school, but they're also very important when taking the Mcat, which is the SAT of med school, basically. So that's another reason to take those courses. And I had one other thing that I wanted to say. It'll probably come to me later. But yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on that whole, what majors are best. I don't think, like Rob said, I don't think there's any major that doesn't fit well. Everything is useful. And I think also someone wrote in the Q&A about why do they want calculus? It really, when you get down to the science, it all is kind of interconnected. Calculus is the foundation of physics, which is the foundation of chemistry, which is the foundation of biology. So that's kind of why they want you to know that. It's all really interconnected. No, you're not going to be taking derivatives when you're a doctor, but you are going to be looking at the rates of things. And, like that's where derivatives come from, right? It's like the normal thing and then the rate. So that's why you have to know these things. And that's just kind of how the system is right now. So there's a lot of things you're not going to be using when you're actually a doctor that you just have to know to get into medical school. Okay, so I kind of started, oh wow, I keep going ahead.
Great.
The next question is, how would you find good fit schools for pre-med?
Yeah, I think you really mentioned something fantastic there about the smaller schools, the liberal art colleges. So many times students will come to me and looking for a college and they'll say, well, I want a small student to faculty ratio. And I understand that, really valuable. And then they'll pivot and say, but I want to go to this large university. And it's like, okay, yes, but if you really want that kind of close relationship with your faculty, liberal art colleges are probably the best place to look for them. Definitely, not only is it typically a very small student faculty ratio, but the primary goal for these teachers, these professors, is to teach. Research is still done, but it's not at the same kind of level in terms of like their commitment. Their primary goal is to teach. Research is more of a secondary situation where it's reversed at the research universities. Another really big benefit of the liberal arts school is research. It doesn't seem like it. Oh, the research universities have more money, well, the liberal arts schools, especially the more prestigious ones, definitely have enough money and lots of money to be doing the research. But the big benefit is you don't have to compete with graduate students. That's a huge thing. When you're going at a larger research university, you show up as a first-year student, you can try and cold call a professor. Most of the time, universities have a dedicated research opportunities program office that will give you a list of the professors and what they're doing. So I always recommend to students, as soon as you put that deposit down for your school, start looking at that site and start trying to get your foot in the door to work at a professor's laboratory or in their clinic. But you're still going to be competing with grad students. They are the primary group that have to work and do the research. You are, as an undergrad, a secondary, person in that department. So there is a big lots of benefits for the liberal arts school. With that said, what's a good fit for pre-med? On some level, it's the schools are very similar. I know there are rankings out there, and as a consultant, I don't like to look at the rankings. I think that puts too much pressure and bias for people. To me, Bio 101 is taught similarly at most colleges and universities across the country. Organic chemistry, general chemistry. These are again calculus. These are courses that are very similar, and there are so many great professors out there that they are not all concentrated into the top 25 schools in this country. They are spread throughout the country, so you're going to get great professors teaching foundational knowledge, and I think that's really important. So what do you look for? How do you separate them? I think one part of it is research. If you're interested in that, how much of a commitment is the school putting towards that? How much money do they have? How much of an increase in their budget do they have for research? Another thing I think is really important is the opportunities outside the classroom. We talked about this earlier, about shadowing, about working at an office. If you go to a school that's a little bit more remote, well, what are your options during the school year or in the summertime? To work at an office, to visit an office, to pick somebody's brain. If you're in a more remote area, it may be more difficult. If you're in a suburban area or an urban area, you're going to have more opportunities. There could be a larger health system associated with that university. There could be a lot of practitioners in the area, just a greater number of people who are willing to have you come in and join their office, join their lab, join their clinic. So that could be a little bit of a separation between schools, but certainly a lot of them academically are going to meet the requirements you need. Some students will say, and families, parents, well, what's the chances that this school will get somebody into medical school? What's the success rate? This is a closely held secret that most schools will not tell you. One, it's hard for them to track because a number of their students apply to medical school or dental school afterwards, after they leave, so they don't know. But most schools don't really announce that. If you go on a college tour or you meet with an admissions officer from a school, you can ask them, and I don't know if you'll get a response, but it doesn't hurt to ask. If the school does have a very strong reputation and it does have good success getting people into medical school, that's another factor to look for as well. I'm not sure, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just remembered the note I was gonna say for the other question about majors. So when thinking about class requirements, another way to give yourself a little bit more flexibility is to take classes over the summer
Mhm.
and to take community college classes. For some requirements, that's totally fine. The more rigorous ones, you don't want to do that. But for example, a psychology requirement, you can definitely just take that at a community college. So then you have more space in your schedule for the 4 years. Um, or even like, I know some people take community college classes in high school. Like, those can also, I think those can also eventually end up helping you. If you take them, I think after you graduate, they can count for as part of the classes that you took before going to med school. Um, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, I agree that any school it is gonna like give you the tools you need to go to medical school. And I think that like the eliteness of the school is not super, super important when thinking about going to medical school. Medical schools like take into account the average like GPA of a student and compare that to your GPA. So it like you don't have to worry about like there being inflation at some schools and deflation at other, like that's all taken into account. So really it comes down to what is best for you. I think another important thing is this culture of the students. Um, some schools are more competitive than others. And personally, like I thrive in a more collaborative kind of environment. And so that was something I looked for when I was applying. And so I actually went to Scripps College. So that's why I love liberal arts colleges. It's one of the Claremont colleges. And the student to faculty ratio was about 20-1. I was never taught by a TA, and I had great relationships with my professors. And there was a pre-med advisor that was always available to talk with me and who I had a personal relationship with all 4 years. So I personally think it's a great way to go if you're pre-med. It's one of the reasons I chose Scripps is because I knew I was pre-med and I wanted to have that low ratio. And that was really important to me. And like Rob said, there were so many research opportunities for first years because there are no grad students to compete with. And professors care about students like more so than in those big schools, just because in those big schools, research is really emphasized. And so they are willing to train first years to be in their lab and work with them and help students find labs if their lab isn't open. So I think like that's a big reason to really think about a small school. I think the last thing I'll say is right now, there are a lot of those informational sessions for undergraduate schools that you may or may not be attending. If you are attending those, feel free to ask like how many pre-meds are generally in your, in one class in that school, and like how many get into med school. They may or may not answer that, right? And like what is the student culture like, and you'll be able to tell. I think also it would be great to try to reach out to students. A lot of these informational sessions sometimes have students there, or they have those like overnights where you can visit the campus or for a day or overnight and ask students then, like they'll be honest with you about what the culture is like and how easy it is. Like I didn't hear from any like UC admissions person how difficult it is to get classes. I heard that from my friends who were at the UCs saying, I tried to register for classes and it was so difficult. And now I'm graduating in 5 years, which is fine, right? Obviously, the UCs have a lot of great things going for them. It's just something to know when you're thinking about where you want to go and where you're applying and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think those are really the things to take into account when you're thinking about what school to go to as a pre-med.
Yeah, I think you bring up so many great topics when every time you're talking, it's so awesome. Like one of the things you mentioned was I guess I'll move to the college level in some of this. Um, yeah, it's important whatever major you're doing, whatever school you're going to. The key is to do well. When I've talked to admissions officers at the medical school and the dental school level, they will say to me, "Look, we have remediation um, programs in place, but we don't have a lot of them and we don't have a lot of time for them." When you get to the medical school, the dental school level, it is serious vocational training. And so they don't really have to, if you can't cut it, then there are some ways to kind of help you, but not many. So when they're looking at college students to admit, they are looking to make sure to the best of their ability that they can predict who is going to do well. Now, their research shows that people with strong GPAs, especially within the pre-med requirements, and also people with strong MCATs, or what's called the dental aptitude test, the DAT. That's the dental equivalent of the SAT and the ACT. Those students, that's that getting those. They don't care as much about the name on the diploma as much as they care about students that have succeeded at the undergraduate level. Can they handle the workload? That's really important. Then there's other things that we may end up talking about as well, like shadowing, research, all the things we talk about for a high school student to get into a college or university, all show up again at the next level. Always important, you got to have, strong standardized test scores, you have to have strong GPA, you have to take strong classes in high school, but then you supplement it with online courses, a summer program, shadowing opportunity, you volunteer, research. Same thing at the undergraduate level. One of the things you mentioned was a pre-med advisor. That person, wherever you end up, that person becomes one of your best friends on campus. That is a person who's going to help you traverse the craziness of what's going on at of the undergrad level to get to the next level. That is a person who is going to be writing a letter of recommendation for you. Some schools may take it from a professor, they may not, but they will all ask for the pre-med advisor. That person is going to help you. That's going to be your advocate to apply to medical schools. That's going to be a person who's going to be your advocate to getting internships and research and job placement. So that is a person you want to really befriend very quickly. And I guess it goes to your idea of, again, the smaller school and the larger school. With a smaller school, usually you may not have the same amount of people in the department, but you usually have a smaller and student to advisor ratio than in a bigger school. So it's another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I'm gonna transition us to like the Q&A that
Yeah.
participants have, just so we make sure to get to everyone's questions.
Mhm.
I think one that I want to start with is someone asked, can you talk a little bit more about the BS-DDS program? So I think the 6-year, 7-year program you did.
Yeah, I can talk about both the BSMD and the DMD, or the dental version. Now my program didn't define it as BSMD. I have a Bachelor of Arts in psychology, but the same idea holds true. These are combined programs, undergrad, graduate. As a high school student, you would apply and you go through 2 levels of evaluation. You're going to be evaluated by the undergraduate college or university. Do you meet their requirements? And then you're going to be evaluated by the medical school or the dental school. Typically, the medical school and the dental school will reserve a couple seats in each class. For the ones that do have this program, they reserve a couple seats in each class for these high school students. Not many. So I do want to let people know that it's highly competitive. When people talk about the most selective schools, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, schools with 3, 4, 5% acceptance rate, the combined medical programs, even at a less selective university, is still harder to get into than the Harvards, Stanfords, and Yales. So for an example, I worked at Virginia Commonwealth. At the undergraduate level, probably an 85% acceptance rate. our BSMD program or the guaranteed admissions medical program had a 1 to 2% acceptance ratio rate. So, you can see it's really hard to get into. I guess dental compared to medical has a little bit higher acceptance rate because there's not as many people applying. What are the benefits? These are 7, 8-year programs. There are no longer any 6-year programs that I'm aware of, which I think is a real big positive. 7 or 8-year programs. If you get into one of these programs, couple big benefits. One, typically you don't need to have as high a GPA. So for example, from my experience, I had to maintain a 3.0 GPA, which is certainly not the same as if I had to, try and get a 4.0. So it gave me freedom as a student. You also, in terms of the Mcat or dental aptitude test, you don't have to get as high a mark as possible. For me, I had to meet the national average, which was certainly, not that that's easy, but it's not very hard as well. So that was a real big plus. Just having that seat saved. What we're seeing, the pandemic certainly did not change anything. In some ways, it made it even more competitive. Dental schools, medical schools, these are hard places to get into. The numbers just like the undergrad level, where a lot of schools, the numbers are declining. Medical and dental school admission rates are declining also. So locking in a seat certainly takes some of the pressure off as well. There's also can be an economic benefit. If you're doing a 7-year program, you're paying for 3 years of undergraduate versus 4. Certainly a benefit. In the long run, is that year going to save you anything when you're 50 years of age? No, it really isn't. It's going to be more anecdotal than anything else. But at a younger age, certainly, with the cost of college and universities now, that's nothing to ignore, having one less year to have to pay for or take loans out for. So that's a big positive. I guess if I were to think about the other side of the coin, what are some things that may not be as ideal about these programs? One is you kind of have to make a decision very early in your life. 15, 16, 17 years of age, you have to kind of plan out, do I want to be a physician? Do I want to be a dentist? There are some people that have this drive and it's arrived at a very early age. There are other people that think that, that's what I'm supposed to do, whether that's societal pressures, whether that's familial pressures, expectations. So there are some people that are really passionate about it and some people that they think they're passionate about it. And there is a bit of a difference. As someone who's done interviews for residency program, I can tell you that I met a lot of people who were years older, than the typical student who went to college and then medical school or dental school. And when we would talk to them, what happened? What's going on? Well, I started out as an engineer. I started out as a business person. I started out in sales. I did something else. And I just felt that wasn't for me, So we do find that people change careers and they change ideas. So, coming up with that idea at a young age, you've got to be very, very certain. And how do you figure that out? You do research, you do shadowing opportunities, you take you take career tests, you take personality tests. Do you match with this? There's the things that you think you fit, that fit for you, and then there's the things that maybe some more objective assessments may confirm or change. So that's something to really consider. Another part of this is the idea that when you're doing 7 or 8 years in a row, it's taxing. But there's an amazing aspect of the undergraduate years, exploring, figuring things out, taking electives, really figuring out who you are and where you fit in the world. When you get to medical school or dental school, from the very first day you get there, they make it really obvious to you that you are here to learn a craft, a really important craft. And they expect you there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they expect you there till 5 o'clock or later in the evening. And that's not a big deal. I mean, if you're really into it, but to do that many years, like 7 or 8 years straight, can be taxing. And then when you talk about the world of medicine, you may add on an internship and a residency and a subspecialty. So you could be looking at, 12 years. And so with these programs, many of them will not allow you to take a break. You could take a gap year between undergrad, high school and undergrad, but you have to double check with a school. Would you allow me to take a year between undergrad and medical school or dental school? Because that really could be a really helpful thing for a student to take that time off. One, if you get a job, never a bad idea to have money in your pocket. It's really helpful. Also, gets you to recharge your battery emotionally, physically, academically. It also inspires you when you do get to medical school or dental school. Hey, I'm ready for this. I'm not going to worry about the individual test. I've got the perspective of putting this in the big picture. So sometimes the BSMD program doesn't allow you that flexibility. So that's something to think about as well. I'm certainly, willing to answer any more questions. I don't know if I answered that person's question completely, and I'm more than happy to expand on it if he or she would like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was great. I don't really have anything to add, to be honest. I mean, I'll say from my experience, I did apply to BSMD programs, and as Rob said, they are highly competitive, literally 1% acceptance rate for like all of them, and so you can only imagine, for example, Brown has a BSMD like program, how much exponentially more competitive it gets when Brown is already a competitive undergraduate school. All that is to say, do not be discouraged if you don't get into them. I didn't, and then I was still pre-med and I had a great time. And in fact, I was really grateful because I was able to take a gap year and I was able to actually explore and think through and, switch between I'm pre-med, I'm not pre-med, it allows a lot more flexibility. And I think it's really important to be very, very sure that you want to be a doctor if you're going to be applying to these programs. And yeah, volunteering at, a hospital or hospice is a great way to do that. Shadowing physicians, any kind of clinical experience too that you can get. Something where you're working with patients, whether it be, in this day and age, administering COVID tests or, assisting a doctor in a clinic, right? Even at the beginning stages when you're still like applying to colleges, even like helping out a PT, helping out an OT, helping out a chiropractor, right? All these things help you expose yourself to the day-to-day of helping patients with various health concerns, which is what you'll be doing as a doctor. And it will help you really see if this is how you can see yourself, what you can see yourself doing, and what you can see yourself working really hard for 8+ years to do.
Yeah, and I'll say also with the BSMDs or DMDs, people see that, and all of a sudden it's like when you see those schools with the low acceptance rate, it's like all of a sudden there's like a glow that comes from them, and then people start getting a little biased, and they start like wanting to grab that gold ring. Like, be careful about a BSMD program that's less prestigious. One of the things about medical school is you really should be looking at a strong medical school that has a good track record of getting people into a residency program. If you go to a less prestigious or lower, that ranking may not, I'm not so concerned at the undergrad level. At the medical school level, there's a big difference. If you go to a lesser quality medical school in one of these kind of combined programs because, oh, I'm excited, I don't have to take that big Mcat score, or I've got that locked in acceptance. That sounds great. But years later, when you're applying for residencies, you may have trouble getting into those, and you cannot get a medical license without doing one of these programs. Dentistry is not like that, thankfully. There are 2 states in the country that require a 1-year residency program, but 48 of the states allow you to finish dental school and go out and do private practice. So it's not as big a concern on that level. But I will say, there are students that I've met, really exceptional students, that will say, well, I'm going to apply to this combined program. And I'm not really thrilled so much about the undergrad school, but again, my goal is the medical school. And I'll say, that's great, but are you really happy to spend 3 to 4 years at that undergrad school? If you're not, then don't apply to that program. Or if you change your mind, now all of these combined programs, you're not locked in like it's the military or anything. If you change your mind and decide you don't want to be a physician or a dentist, you can get out of the programs. But then you're at a school that you may not have chosen a few years earlier. If someone said to you, are you willing to go to this school just for the 3 or 4 years? Oh no, I'm not that. Well, then don't put that on your list. The other thing I would say, if you are thinking about applying to these programs, you have got to be an objectively super strong candidate. And that goes to the things that were mentioned earlier. You have to have strong GPA and strong classes. Even during COVID, when tests were being canceled around the country, the combined programs were saying, we still want to see a test score. And it's got to be a high test score in the, really the mid 1500s or higher. You've got to have the shadowing, the research, even if it was virtual during a pandemic, you still had to find opportunities to do this. So many times I see students that are good students, but they're not at the top of those kind of metrics. And they're still saying, I think I'll apply to 2 or 3 or 4 of these BSMD programs. Yeah, on the one hand, there's no harm in doing that, but emotionally, it's tough to not get an interview at these programs. It takes time away from your other applications. And also it just sets up a false sense of expectation. So really, if you are going to consider those, you have to be very intentional from 9th grade on and very successful in the way colleges look at that: grades, GPA, strength of schedule, test scores.
Yeah, and you can still go to med school even if you don't
Absolutely.
get SMD, so it's okay.
100%.
And another thing, like there actually is a BADO program, and DO is another type of medical school at one of the Claremont colleges. And I've had a lot of friends in that program. And one thing I think worth pointing out is and I think this is true with a lot of those programs, they choose your major, they choose your classes, they choose your schedule. Everything is done for you. You just keep going. And so that is important to know going into this. Like, it's not going to be an exploration. It's going to be like what Rob was saying about med school, about how they're preparing you for a craft. That's BSMD is like, they're kind of already starting that earlier, where they're like, okay, we're preparing you for med school. So it definitely changes your undergraduate experience. And that could be good and bad, right? It just depends on what you're interested in and like what you want to do. And you can always get out of it. So but yeah, so another question here, I think a really fast one. Will any AP scores be able to waive the requirements for med school? I know some of them don't.
Yes,
So
so you have to check with each institution, right? Because I know, like, I'm out here in the New York area. Stony Brook will say if you do that, I think it's Stony Brook. Don't hold me to that, but there are schools that will say if you use the AP, we expect you to take a similar departmental course. Fine, you got out of Bio 101 and 102, but we expect you to take another, 2 other bio courses in their place.
That's what I've seen. Generally, it definitely depends on the school. I would say to be safe, I've seen some flexibility with AP psychology, where you can get out of intro to psychology, and then all you have to do is take a upper division psychology course. I have seen that some schools don't allow that for any other class. I would say definitely chemistry, biology, physics. It's going to be pretty hard for them to take an AP test score instead of the college class. But then undergrad, sometimes AP scores can help. So then you have to be aware if they're saying, oh, you have 5 in your AP chemistry, you're out of intro to chemistry. Maybe you still take it anyways, because med schools are probably going to require it. So just keep that in mind with the AP scores. So another question. What kind of summer programs will benefit or stand out in this kind of application, pre-med or BSMD?
Yeah. I would say that the programs that give you some hands-on experience are probably beneficial. I personally did summer research at the University of Iowa for several years. I was at 1 year I was at the medical school, 1 year I was at the dental school. If there are, again, these programs that give you lectures, so like this kind of, like I used to get weekly lectures from specialists, and then I would work in the lab and I wrote a research abstract at the end of the summer. So those kind of programs are really helpful. Of course, they're not the only avenue. I mean, these programs do tend to be expensive. So you do want to be aware of that. And I think for schools, they understand that, colleges, universities understand that. And so they value other experiences also. If there's something maybe that's at a university and it's local, that may be an option to cut down some of the costs and still be able to take advantage of those experiences. If you can just work at your local hospital, that's another thing as well that we've talked about. The shadowing opportunities, volunteering at hospice centers, nursing homes, physician's office, getting a job. Whether you're at the local blood center, you're working for a local medical organization, dental organization, those are beneficial. But in terms of the structured university programs, ones that deal with research, ones that allow you to get some kind of shadowing clinic experience, some that introduce you to different medical and dental specialists, those are always valuable as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like there are plenty of jobs out there that I believe are like allowed for like 18 and over. A lot of them require like training, but they can be really great, like EMT, right? Working in an ambulance, very rigorous, but you'll definitely get a lot of valuable experience. And really, if you like that, then you probably are going to be good. And if you don't like that, you might still be good to be a doctor, honestly, because that's very rigorous. And then there's also certified nursing assistant. A lot of those, that is also you're required to take a really quick, like 6-week course. And they often work in hospice or in hospitals. So there's lots of jobs like that that are relatively low barrier to entry that give you a lot of valuable experience. I think like if that's not really something you're looking for, the best thing to do is to really use your connections and reach out to those doctors that you know personally, whether it be a family friend or, I would guess almost everyone here has their own pediatrician or physician, like family physician, that reach out to them. They're the perfect starting point. Even if they don't have availability, they know a ton of doctors. They can point you in the right direction. So that's a great place to start, and just start by saying, can I help out or can I shadow? And often if you are consistent, like naturally you're gonna start getting more responsibilities and you'll start growing. And if you like start now, by the time you're applying to med school, it's like 4 years, like you'll have a really, really strong amount of experience for that. But yeah, so I mean, that's not really summer programs, but I think those are the best things you could do. But like Rob said, there's great research programs, and anything that really shows that you have sought out experiences related to medicine will help you stand out. And I also saw another question, do I really have to volunteer in a hospital setting? You don't have to, but I mean, if you can, it's great, but you definitely don't have to. Like if it's really, really hard to find opportunities. Personally, I know a lot of you are based in the Bay Area. I volunteered at the hospital in Burlingame, the Mills Peninsula Health Center. They're always receiving applications for high school students. So that's a great place to start if you're interested in that. But yeah, you don't have to.
Yeah, out here in New York, we will have their vaccine drives. There are public health drives into the community. They are always asking for people to help out. Certainly during COVID, they needed volunteers, but it's not, even if it's not in a direct patient-facing role, it's still helping everybody out, and you get to spend time with all of the medical, personnel. So there are definitely many different ways that you can seek out volunteer opportunities. Just, again, that's not that. Yeah, it doesn't always have to be at a hospital or a nursing home or a hospice center. No, absolutely not. And you talked about that idea of working at a physician's office, getting a CNA license. Yeah, from the dental perspective, you could get a dental assisting license. It's not easy, but it's also not incredibly difficult as well. That would allow you to, get a job. Again, this is what colleges love is not only extracurriculars that have intention and show a connection and a theme to the career you may want. But it's really I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but it's that idea that like you're working in the office. Oh, I know what it was, that you're working for an extended period of time. You're not just necessarily doing this for a summer. So if you got a dental assisting certificate, you could work at offices, or an office for like a couple of years. And again, that shows longevity on top of the thematic connection. Going back to that AP question, I know I'm going to pivot from that a little bit. One of the things we didn't talk about was post-bac programs. So let's say you don't really figure it out right away that you want to be in medicine. There's always another option. After you've graduated, you could do these post-baccalaureate programs. Those are programs that allow you to take all the pre-med or pre-dental requirements. If you've taken some of them at the college level, great, you get to place out of those, so it may not take as long for you to do that. So there are definitely ways to, to kind of, if you don't figure out you want to be a physician or a dentist right away, it's not over for you. You still have a chance after college at the undergrad level.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I want to kind of get through these questions. We have like a few minutes left. So this question we kind of touched on, so maybe we could just give a brief answer. I'm trying to decide between a smaller liberal arts school and a larger, more STEM focused school. Which do you think is better for med school acceptance?
I don't think either. Again, I think that's something we did touch on. If you do well, it's not going to matter which one. I think it's really an idea of fit. What do you want out of your education? Do you want a more personalized, more intimate, smaller environment? Do you want to do research and you're not having to, compete with the grad students? Or are you looking for, what's the benefits of a larger, university? Because there are tremendous benefits. Larger communities, larger social networks, maybe larger alumni networks as well. That, those people give back to the university. Hey, do you want to intern in my office for the summer? I went to the same university. There's a greater connection. There may be more research opportunities than at the liberal arts school, but also from a social standpoint, larger student body, there are ways to meet more people and create a stronger connection of friends. So there are definitely trade-offs. Neither's perfect. They're all great. What works better for you? And that don't worry so much about the next level. Focus right now on doing what you need to do to succeed at the high school level, and then look for schools that fit your interests and your strengths.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I totally agree. And then there's, what is the most important criteria to get into medical school, GPA, or rigorous coursework, or volunteering related to medicine?
Are we talking about from high school getting into college, or?
I think they're talking about college getting into medical school.
Well, I think we've touched on that also. As opposed to like the high school level, the medical schools and the dental schools are telling you what the requirements are. Like, these are the classes you need to take. So I don't want to kind of gloss over it. You do need a strong GPA overall, but you especially need it in the required courses. So those are the biggies. The Mcat or dental aptitude test scores, those are the biggest things. Just like at the undergrad level, when you go on the common data set and you see the very important is strength of schedule and GPA. For the medical school, dental school, it's going to be GPA overall, GPA in the pre-med requirements, Mcat DAT score. Then in the important category are going to be things like research, shadowing, volunteer, essay. You do have to write a similar style essay, when the time comes. Why why do I want to do this field? And why do I want to do this, practice medicine at your school? So it's that same kind of thing. So yeah, that's basically what I would say.
Yeah. Just to add on, I think one of the most important things that are overlooked is having clinical experience, which means at that point, it's like you want to have interacted with patients for a prolonged period of time at some point in your undergraduate career.
Yeah.
And they're looking for people who aren't just checking boxes, like who aren't, like Rob said, doing it for a summer and then doing something else, like doing it for long periods of time and showing that you actually grew and learned something from clinical experience. But this is all stuff that you're going to do in college. They said they actually do want to know what is important for undergraduate admission as well.
Yeah, I think it's, there's a similarity to all of this. It's like, do
Yeah.
you really want to do this for a career? And you may not know it fully at 18 or 17. You may know it more at 21 or 22, but really do challenge yourself at this level. Take those if you can take the challenging courses and you can do it in a way that is keeps your emotional wellness intact, then challenge yourself. If you have a chance to do these kind of extracurricular opportunities, you are involved in clubs like Health Occupation Society of America, HOSA, right? Like get involved in these clubs. Do shadowing opportunities, like everything you can do to build a strong portfolio is really beneficial. It's helpful for the school, but it's also helpful for you to figure out, do you want to do this? Do you like this? One of the things you just talked about at going into the medical school level, you may want to get a job after medical school. Again, we talked about this. You get that clinical experience, get money in your pocket, but also really figure out, is the day-to-day doing this for like a year or two, is this day-to-day something that makes you excited at the end of the day? Or do you say, I lost interest? If you lost interest, better to know it now than a couple of years later. But the same, you can't really make that same commitment at the high school level, but by doing these kind of more involved extracurriculars, volunteering, shadowing, that will give you a little bit more perspective. Is this the right field for you?
Yeah. Okay, so we have one last question before we close our meeting. So it says, is it better to apply early decision to BSMD or to other top schools that you might have a better chance? As per the stats I've read, many schools do accept a higher number of applicants in ED. And so applying to top schools regular decision is a lot harder. So should I take advantage of the increased acceptance rates on normal programs or at competitive universities or BSMD?
That's an interesting question. The BSMD, the combined programs are going to have they're going to have a defined application cycle. They don't do it necessarily the same as the rest of the university. So they may say to you, this is when you have to apply. Some may say November, some may say January. The thing you have to realize is with the BSMDs, they don't give early decisions because you have to go through multiple levels of the application process. And as we said earlier, the first level is the undergrad admit, looks at you. Are you a qualified candidate for their school? If you pass that hurdle, which for many of these schools is a high bar, but let's say you pass that hurdle. Now the medical school admissions or the dental school admissions group comes in and takes a look at it. If they think you're a strong candidate, they will go back to the undergrad admissions and say, okay, this person now gets to come to the university to be interviewed. So about 10% of all the applicants make it to that level. Now you have to show up and you do like a day-long interview. You go to the undergrad, you go to the graduate school, you spend time in the clinics, you pick the brains of some fellow students, which, as you said earlier, is a tremendous thing. Reach out to the pre-med societies at every school. Like these students are happy to share their experience with you. But going back to the BSMD or DMD, this is a lengthy process. So you will not find out early about these programs. So some of the schools have restrictions on where else you can apply. So you kind of have to do your research. But best case scenario is do the thing that's right for you. If you value the BSMD over an early decision application, then you may want to hold off on the early decision. Ultimately, again, that's a personal decision. I think you have to go with that idea, as we said earlier, these schools, these programs have a 1 to 2% acceptance rate. So if you think you have a better chance at a strong school, do you want to give that up for something that could be an even harder get at the end of the day?
Yeah, I totally agree. From a stats perspective, it makes sense to apply to a normal program. But I think it really comes down to what do you want? You know, it's not about trying to get into like what do you have the highest likelihood of getting into? It's about where do you want to go? It's so like you get so sucked into like where will I get in though that you forget like do I even want to get in? You know, like you have to go a step back and think like where do you actually want to go and base it on that more than anything. And I think like just a few thoughts to close our meeting. If you don't want to be pre-med, you don't have to be pre-med. It, you know, like I think it's easy to get caught up in everything. And like if I was to tell my high school self something, it would be, you know, there are plenty of other options. It's amazing. Our medical field has so many paths to helping people and in a medical sense. You know, you could be a physician's assistant, you could be a nurse, you could do PT, you could, you know, you could do a PhD, right? A clinical PhD. There's so many options, and med school is just so inundated with so many people that it's overly competitive. And anyone will tell you that, any doctor, any med school admissions person, anyone will tell you it is overly competitive. So if your end goal is to just work with patients, there are many ways to do that, and you don't have to do this extremely difficult path. That being said, like if this is what you want to do, then go for it. I just want to like put that out there. We've been talking so much about how to do it. I want to say you don't have to do it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful life, and it may not be or career, and it may not be for everybody. And I think the big thing about when you see these kind of programs or schools, yeah, there are different pathways in life, academically, professionally. Do not worry about like if you don't get into one of these BSMD or you do not apply to them, that is fine. I understand that there's some definite positives to them, but these are high risk you know, chances, and definitely don't throw away other options, and don't feel, even if you do have this passion to do this, don't feel that you have to rush your life. 7 and 8 years, yes, the economics are beneficial for that 7 years, but you know, it's a cliche, but you only get the chance at undergrad once. You know, take advantage of it. You know, you get to college and you see courses that you don't even have at your high school, and so you don't even know what to expect right now. So for those that are super passionate about it and super successful at the high school level, there are these options. For everybody else, you've got options as well, in pre-med, out of pre-med. Don't worry about it. You know, it's all going to work out. It may not be the exact thing you have set at this moment, but it is all going to work out well for you.
Definitely. Okay. Well, thank you so much for attending and interacting with us, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Take care. Thanks.